Dr. Rose with Dr. Rose Helps You here. I'm Stephanie Rose, and today I'm going to show you how to change an ear mold tube. This is a little bit hard. It takes a little bit of art and a little bit of elbow grease to get these done. So the first thing you want to do is remove the old tube, and if it's been cemented in there, sometimes you have to use unglue to get the tube out. If that happens, put it in a little shot glass with the unglue, let it meld in there, and then you're going to go ahead and remove the tube. If it's too hard to pull on, get yourself a pair of these. What are these? Needle nose pliers? I think that's what you call these. And then just pull them out. Like so. They sent me some juicy ones, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean these first. I'm gonna put these in a sonic bath with soap and water for like, I don't know, 2 minutes. Okay, I'm back. So also make sure that you're suctioning out the vent and suctioning out where the tube was, and totally let this dry. Pump some air through there till they are nice and dry, because then your thin cement won't grab. So the things you're gonna need is new tubing, thin cement, and some kind of cutting tool to get flush with the end of that mold. Now, don't throw away the old ones. Hang on to these. In case the patient's not there, you can kind of guesstimate the length that you will need. And that's like a whole other deal. But anyway, I'm just gonna show you the physical motions of tubing the ear mold. So the tube has a top and a bottom. We're gonna feed this part with the pointy end through the part of the mold that is the outer part of the mold, the part that faces the outside of the ear. There's two holes. There's a really tiny pinhole that's the vent, and then there's the top hole that is where the tube is supposed to come out. So I'm gonna go ahead and feed this through the top part. And if it's too small, if it is too small, like that is too small to feed through, you wanna make sure you're choosing the right diameter tube as well. This looks like it's a 12, so that's actually pretty good. This is just a really tight tube. I'm gonna try this one here. I think that's also a 12, and yep, same thing, that is not gonna go through. So good thing I brought my threader from home. I literally found this in a drawer at home, and I'm like, I might need that for that video. And we did not have one in clinic, so I'm really glad I grabbed that up. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, this is the right ear mold. I'm gonna go ahead and feed this threader tool. This is gonna help me pull that tube through that really narrow opening. So I'm gonna go ahead and pinch this together at the end, and I'm gonna feed that through the inner ear part. Like so, till it comes out the other end. Can you see that there? Now, when I go to load my tube on there, I'm gonna grab like this last little bit right here and feed that through the threader, and at the same time I'm gonna pull the threader back. If you only go a little bit right here though, it's gonna pull off. So you wanna feed a good amount into that threader tool, and then you're gonna slowly pull. If you do it too fast, it'll snap through that tubing material. So just slowly pull until it comes through the mold. And if you're doing a test for this, you're not impressing anyone. As I'm pulling, I'm trying to maintain an upward diameter so that this tube faces up when this is in the ear. So you guys can see this is like lateral plane with the ear, with the bottom of the canal here. And then I want to make sure that my hook is going to be pulled all the way through, but still with this part facing upward. So there's, a lot of degrees where you can do that wrongly. So it's going to take some practice. I'm still pulling that through there. I'm not quite there, but I'm still going. And it hasn't broke, so that's a good thing. If it breaks, you have to get a new tube and start over, unless you think you can thread further down the same tube. And there it is, it's starting to come out. See that? I'm not done yet though. I gotta keep pulling until that last little end comes out and it unthreads. So there, I finally broke through. This is still not quite in enough, because see how much it's still got the hook on the outside. We want to go about halfway up that little hook to pull this through here. That way it lays properly up the ear when this is on the ear on a hearing aid. So I'm gonna go, you can take your fingers and do this. If you pull too much, it's gonna slip through too far, and then you can come back this way. But when you're coming back this way, you don't want to pull too much, because then this will go back into the mold, and we don't want that. We want to get this in the right spot. That's the most important part when you're tubing an ear mold. So I actually, when it's really hard, I'll take my pliers again, and I'm gonna pinch it right here, and then I'm just gonna barely pull a little bit. I just have a little bit more control over it like this, to just barely pull on that tube a little bit. So I want it to kind of sit up, but not so far this way, that this is like going like this, because it will get too short and then this tube will start pulling the other way. We don't want it to go that way. We just barely want it sitting a little bit further from 12 o'clock. So I think that this is actually pretty good. This is actually a pretty, and this, you know, depending on how flexible your tube is, you can't always go on this, but you really do want to just look at that and see that that is actually perfect, because once this goes in the ear, it is going to kind of come up. So you want to have a little bit of give, a little bit of leeway here, and that is a perfect place to have your tube. So I'm going to go ahead and now show you how we cut this. So if I cut this right here, it's not going to be completely flush. So the last part of this is to cut it as close as you can to the mold without breaking or nicking the mold. This is acrylic, and we do the same process with silicone. We just use a different kind of glue. Notice I did not use the thin cement. If it is tight enough for you to have to use a threader tool, skip the thin cement. That'll also keep your patient coming back more regularly for tubing changes, and it will help keep them hearing better. So, you know, at least once every 3 months, or 1 to 3 months for tubing changes when they can't hear well. And so, but I'll do the thin cement on the other one so that you can see at what point we put that on. So carrying on here, you can use either a cutter tool like this, but honestly, like, this is okay. I can never seem to get close enough. I like having more control, so I use some clipper tools. And I'm sorry, I don't know the name of this. Anyway, this brand is called Work Pro. I don't know. Anyway, just get yourself some cutters. So what I'm gonna do before I just cut it, because if I cut it and it's exposed, you're gonna have to do one of two things. You're gonna have to buff that tube flush, or you're gonna have to pull this back till it comes into the mold. And again, you risk pulling it too far and pulling it completely out of the mold. So what I'm gonna do is kind of a cheater way to do this to ensure that you're not gonna go too far one way or the other. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my 2 fingers right here, I'm gonna hold my tube and I'm gonna stretch it up. I mean, it's in there so much, I'm not gonna be able to like pull that out with just those 2 fingers, but it's stretching the tube up a little further, and then I'm gonna clip it as close as I can to that mold while I'm pulling. And then hopefully it will come out pretty flush. If it's not flush, because I didn't quite clip it, I can see it's got just a teeny tiny little bit. You could try to clip it the rest of the way with something like this. It's pretty blunt, pretty sharp. And just kind of clip the rest of it, but be really kind to that acrylic. That's actually pretty good. I can still feel a tiny little part up there, but you don't want to hurt that acrylic. So just keep at it. You can also take like a little emery board and kind of, you know, lightly buff that, but then again, you don't want to get the acrylic. So if you rub your finger over this and you're feeling the acrylic and maybe just a tiny little bit of that tube, then that's going to be okay. But if you're going like this and you're feeling more tubing than acrylic, then it's not good, because that is hard. It will get harder over time and it will hurt the patient. So what I'm gonna do is use my pinch. I'm gonna use my pinch trick. So I'm gonna pinch the tube right here, and I'm just barely gonna move it a nanometer, and it just barely moved inside of that tube. So now, inside of the bore. So now it is completely inside of the ear mold, totally flush. I cannot feel any part of that tube, and that is the goal, to be just a nanometer inside of that ear mold. Okay, maybe not a nanometer, but like, you know, less than a millimeter inside the mold. That's perfect. Flush, completely flush, maybe tucked in a little bit. So now, when you go to put this on a patient, you're done tubing this. This is it. But when you go to put it on the patient, you want to fully put it in the ear. You want to put the BTE where you want it to sit, with the hook at a natural, you know, placement. And then you're going to take a Sharpie and you're going to mark on the tube where you want to cut it. I wouldn't make it a habit of cutting it on the patient unless you're like really good and your patient doesn't move. I still wouldn't recommend that, especially if you're a newbie. So mark it with a thin Sharpie marker, take it off the patient, use these. These are great because they're straight across. Cut it straight across, take the BTE, hook it on. I'm sorry, I don't have one to show you that part. And then give it to your patient. Make sure they put it on again to make sure that you didn't cut too much or cut too little. You don't want the BTE standing up on the ear because that will cause pressure sores. You want it to be resting and relaxing on the ear, not pulling too tight either. Okay, let's do this other one really quick. So this is the left mold. I'm gonna go ahead and use my threader because I know already that this is probably too tight. Let's see. Oh yeah, way too tight. So I'm gonna use my threader, but I'm gonna pretend like we got a little bit more room in here, that it's maybe not a tortuous canal, it's maybe straight in, and we're worried about the tube migrating. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. No, I'm going the right way. Sorry, it's the end of the day and I traveled today, so I'm a little tired. Okay, so I'm gonna put this part in here. I'm gonna move this like so, all the way down. And now, let's say that I'm now pulling this through. I'm gonna take my thin cement and I'm gonna paint along here where it's gonna rest in the mold and just a little bit up the hook, just like that, just about the length of your mold. And then you want to be swift at pulling it through. Usually we wouldn't do this if we're threading, but I'm just gonna be a little swift there. Look at that, I barely got that to come out of there. That's okay though, if there's something to grab onto. If there's something to grab onto, then all hope is not lost. You don't want to just pull right here though. You want to keep working it back down as you're stretching it. You may lose it, I may lose it, we'll see. I should have threaded a little bit lower. And that glue may have stopped me. Oh no, I got it. I got it. If you see this much, you're golden. Okay, just a little bit more here. And then at this point, if you've taken a long time, that thin cement does dry really fast. And if you want to add just a little bit more for the rest of your pull, then that's good. You can do that. So notice I didn't pull it to the point where it's going that way. Right there, that's good right there. Then I'm gonna go ahead and pull and cut. And then I'm just gonna pull the nanometer back in there. And that's hard to do when you have glue, so you gotta move fast. Totally tucked in, totally flush. This is a beautiful tube. That's it. Let me know if you have any comments below. Let me know if you have any questions below.